say to you while watching the expert actor drive.
Indie horror games in the last few years since Five Nights at Freddy's have taken a plunge in not only quality, but how actually scary they are. Most indie horror games nowadays rely on cheap jump scares to scare the player instead of actual clever, scary aspects. It's a trend that happened mostly due to the Five Nights franchise. And because of the Five Nights franchise, most indie horror games have been reduced to cheap jump scare simulators and wishy-washy kid-friendly games on the surface with dark lore to be found. It's a tiring trope that almost every indie horror game has adopted. Me and a lot of people miss when indie horror games didn't trade atmosphere and story for jump scares and terrible gameplay. Games like Creepypasta Land, the Dominic's trilogy, the Bad Dream series, and I'm Scared. So many great horror games from back in the day. Now we have stuff like Poppy's Playtime, Bendy and the Ink Machine, Hello Neighbor, just a bunch of shitty jump scare simulators. And that's not to say there's no good indie horror games that invoke the feeling of old ones released today. Of course there is. There's games like Escape the Backrooms, The Coffin of Andy and Layla, and Fierce to Fathom. Let's get this out of the way. If it wasn't obvious, modern indie horror games are bad. Stating this is just as obvious as telling someone World Wide Web is faster than saying www. But there's a reason why people keep saying it. It's because everyone is tired of shitty indie horror games. Why can't there be a scary indie horror game? Or a good one for that matter? Why is it so hard? Well, it can't be that hard because it happened as recently as 2022. So let me introduce to you the world of actually scary indie horror games. But before we begin, go down and hit that like and subscribe button. Helps me out a lot more than you think. It's free and it only takes seconds to do. And share this video with everyone and anyone. I'm trying to hit 200 by the end of the year, so subscribe. My goal is to eventually hit 100k, so if you want to be part of that, you know what to do. So get yourself some popcorn, something to drink, and make sure to keep those lights off. Join me as we dive deep into the world of actually scary indie horror games. I wasn't joking about keeping those lights off. Keep them off. 2015 was the real beginning of the downfall of indie horror games. Of course, if you look back on old YouTubers like Markiplier and Jacksepticeye, you do get a bunch of decent indie horror games. But after the release of the mediocre Five Nights at Freddy's 3, yeah, there was no saving it. Now, claiming all indie horror games that came out in 2015 after FNAF 3 would just be stirring the pot. It's just that most of them kind of sucked. However, despite the shortcomings of the indie horror game scene at the time, there was a diamond in the rough. A game that you have no doubt heard of. A game called Emily Wants to Play. It's a game about dolls. Wonderful. Horror tropes aside, Emily Wants to Play is a legitimate scary experience. What makes Emily Wants to Play so scary is how helpless you are in a situation as you're at the mercy of Emily and her dolls, forced to play twisted games in order to stay alive. Failing said games will end in your death. Being released on December 10th, 2015, being developed and published by the new developer at the time, Sean Hitchcock at Hitchcock's Games. When this game was first released, it absolutely blew up. Every YouTuber you expect to play horror games played Emily Wants to Play, and it was successful to say the least. Millions of views across a multitude of different channels. It was so successful it eventually spawned a sequel only 3 days and 2 years later. While Emily Wants to Play 2 is also a pretty scary experience, Emily Wants to Play 1 in my opinion nailed the horror element a lot better than Emily Wants to Play 2 did. But we're not talking about Emily Wants to Play 2, we're talking about Emily Wants to Play 1, so let's get into it. Emily Wants to Play is very impressive for, to my knowledge, a first-time developer. Like the games I mentioned in the intro, this isn't purely a jump scare simulator, although jump scares are still in it, only happening upon you losing though, so it isn't too much of an annoyance. The story of Emily Wants to Play goes as follows. It's 11 p.m. and it's the last house on your route. The windows are boarded up, the yard is overgrown, but the lights are on and the front door is open. Strange place to deliver a pizza. You're getting soaked from the rain, so you hesitantly step into the house. You shouldn't have done that. As stated earlier, you, the player, are a pizza delivery man on his last stop. Despite the house seemingly being abandoned, it appears the lights are on and the front door is open, so you step inside because, well, the pouring rain is soaking you. Upon stepping into the house, you realize no one's there. But before you can leave, you're locked inside by someone who honestly looks like they need to step into the sun more. Well, looks like you're locked in the house. What are you gonna do? Well, you have an hour to decide what you want to do, as 11 p.m. is your safe time. This is a really good time to look for certain things like a flashlight and notes around the house that clue you into the overarching story. It's through these notes that you learn that the disgusting goblin that locked you in this house is called Emily. Oh my god, just like the title of the game. Now, if you've never paid attention to Emily Wants to Play's story while watching your favorite YouTuber play it, honestly, I wouldn't have blamed you. However, as we move hour to hour, I will bring it up when necessary. Reading some of the notes is revealed that you're not the first person to be here, as there's a note reading, I think they want to kill me. But who's they? Well, as the night progresses, you'll find out. Going to the kitchen, you can spot a whiteboard and a laptop with a pizza delivery website open, implying you've been lured here as a trap. But why? Well, you have no time to think about it, as now that you have your trusty flashlight in hand and you've read all the notes you can find around the house, 6 minutes have passed and the clock strikes 12. 12 a.m. is where Emily Wants to Play really begins. 11 p.m. was just a free hour. You gotta get yourself ready for the real game. The way I'm gonna be covering this game is hour by hour, as it's the only real way it would make sense to cover this game. 12 a.m. is obviously the most calm hour. Now that you've familiarized yourself with the layout of the house, it shouldn't be too much of a problem, as there's only one enemy. Intentional or not, Emily Wants to Play preys upon the fear we all had as children. Dolls, derived from evil doll movies we watched even though our parents told us not to. Movies like Child's Play, Dolls, The Puppet Master, and Dolly Dearest. There's a lot of evil doll movies that this game is very similar to. I think the most similar is Dolly Dearest, as listening to the tapes around the house, it's revealed that Emily became infatuated with these dolls, almost like they were brainwashing her. She became so obsessed with the dolls that they basically became her life. It's implied that the dolls had a very negative effect on Emily as she became more violent, especially at school, even attacking another boy. But clearly the dolls don't like you snooping around the house, so you're introduced to the first enemy, Kiki. Kiki is the first doll you'll meet, with a distinct laugh sound effect playing whenever she appears behind you, somewhere in the room. Your goal is to find her and look at her as long as you can until she eventually disappears. It's at this point I should probably mention this game isn't very difficult. Now, that's not a bad thing, as a horror game doesn't necessarily need to be difficult or have a difficulty curve. Horror games aren't like normal games, they're experiences more than actual games, so difficulty really isn't a priority. However, just because Emily Wants to Play isn't difficult does not mean it doesn't have RNG bullshit, because trust me, it does. However, we'll discuss that when the time comes. Because Kiki is the easiest enemy to deal with, you can explore the house more and find out more about the story, reading more of the notes and listening to the tapes. It's told that Emily only started behaving violently after moving to the new house, and more importantly, finding the dolls. The parents only thought the behavioral change was due to the stress of moving. It's later revealed that Emily's mother made the tapes by the recommendation of her therapist to document Emily's behavioral changes. The mother then reveals that Emily has been kicked out of 3 schools, the last one being due to attacking another boy. So after that point, the parents decided to keep her home. Oh, looks like we're about to move into the next hour, as it's now 1 a.m. 11 a.m. is where they throw another opponent into the ring, if you can call it that. Meet Mr. Taters. Just like every other doll in this game, you first meet Mr. Taters walking through the house at 11 p.m. just for him to disappear like the other 2 dolls do as well, to catch the player off guard, which is pretty effective.
Oh no! Oh no! Oh,
that's another thing that makes Emily Wants to Play an actually scary indie horror game. Little arbitrary events happening every once in a while to catch the player off guard, and at some point it's not even a jump scare like the dolls disappearing. It's just a creepy visage. As an example, when you first enter Emily's room, she scuttles across the floor, or walking into the garage first time just to see Emily standing there, just to disappear once you get close to her. It's heavily implied that there's a paranormal aspect to not only the dolls, but Emily herself, as randomly throughout the night, lights will turn off and doors will shut and open, not to mention the fact that the dolls are moving by themselves. Emily Wants to Play throughout each hour likes to prey upon your paranoia. For example, randomly shutting lights off in the room you're in, just to make you panic, thinking there's a doll near you. It terrifyingly blends random events with doll encounters, as you're at a huge disadvantage when the lights are off, and as the night progresses, the dolls appear more frequently. Mr. Taters is probably going to be the biggest obstacle for you this night, as once Mr. Taters appear, you have to stare him in the eye while not moving a single muscle. Even slightly moving your mouse will end in death. For 1 AM, you have to defend yourself from Mr. Tatus and Kiki at the same time. However, there's a bit of an oversight with Mr. Tatus that becomes more apparent in the next hour. However, I think it's about time we revisit the story. After keeping Emily home, her parents found her talking to the dolls, so the parents assumed that Emily was getting better. So they decided to get her a puppy. As any sane person could predict, Emily kills the dog. The tape reveals that the reason she killed the dog is because she doesn't like it. More likely she killed it because the dolls told her to. As in Emily Wants to Play 2, it's hinted that whatever is controlling these dolls is someone named the Puppet Master. He kills to become stronger. For what purpose, I have no idea, as it's never revealed. Anywho, after this little incident, her parents started to feel what Emily was capable of, as some nights her mother would see her standing in the window of their bedroom, watching them sleep. It was after this encounter they both decided locking her in the basement would be the best for all of them. Oh my! It seems another hour has passed. So shall we see what other horrors are in store for us at 2 AM. 2 AM introduces our final doll, Chester. Chester on paper is pretty simple. Once you hear him laugh, he'll appear somewhere in the room with you. All you have to do is run away and get out of his line of sight, and eventually he'll get tired and stop chasing you. Pretty simple. For 2 AM, you have to defend yourself from both Mr. Tatus and Chester. Seems like Kiki took a break for this hour. However, that doesn't mean it's any easier because Chester and Mr. Tatus makes the dream team from hell. So, do you remember when I was telling you Mr. Tatus had an oversight that would become more apparent at 2 AM? Well, you're about to find out. If you recall how Mr. Tatus worked, you could probably see where this is going, because you have to stand completely still when Mr. Tatus appears. That means if another doll appears, you are dead, especially if it's Chester. This is consistently one of the things a lot of people complain about, as if you're running away from Chester and Mr. Tatus appear, it's game over. Chester also can just spawn at your feet or in a corner where you can't see him, so you just run into him. I think all the dolls individually have really good mechanics. You put them all together, and not so much. Because the majority of Emily Wants to Play is RNG, it could take you one try or a bunch of tries to beat. I think one of the comments I found on Emily Wants to Play's fandom wiki 2 AM page sums it up pretty well. 2 AM is so annoying. One doll wants you to stay, but the other one wants you to leave. And I'm pretty sure Sean heard of this, as in Emily Wants to Play 2, Mr. Tatus works a little differently, as instead of completely having to stand still, you have to play a game of red light, green light. Plus the fact that he's the only one of the original 3 to have his mechanics change. Also, what makes it even worse is the fact that none of the dolls have cooldowns on when they can spawn. There's something I should mention about Chester specifically, and that's if you go into the basement, you are fucking dead, as the corridors don't provide enough coverage to get out of Chester's sight, and because it's basically just a maze with a bunch of dead ends. But other than that, 2 AM isn't anything special, but in spite of that, we still need to finish up the story. After locking Emily in the basement, a few days pass, and upon one fateful day, the mother walks into the basement to give Emily some food, only to discover she's not responding. She wasn't breathing, nor did she have a pulse. The parents knew she was dead. However, instead of calling the police or telling anyone, they decided to keep it a secret, as there would be no possible way they could explain what happened without sounding guilty. The mother's suspicions about the dolls would soon be confirmed. Weeks passed after Emily's demise, and the parents start to notice that the dolls seem to appear and disappear in random locations. They knew they had to get out of there as soon as possible. Unfortunately for them, in the middle of packing their belongings, they were killed by the dolls and presumably Emily as well, which explains the half-packed boxes littering the house. Something I really appreciate about Emily Wants to Play's story is, unlike the stupid fucking bear game, the story is pretty straightforward and is laid out for you to piece together. All you really need to do is listen to the tapes to get a broad understanding of the story. Hold on, you hear that? Sounds like ticking. Looks like we're about to move on to 3 AM. 3 AM is just 2 AM, but now you have to deal with Kiki. All you need to do is survive. It's simply a little bit more difficult, as the problems from 2 AM are still here, but worse because of Kiki. As if Kiki spawns behind you with Mr. Tatus, it's basically game over unless she spawns maybe a second before Mr. Tatus leaves. Also, for some reason, Chester becomes way more obnoxious. I don't know why. It's probably because we had to face him an hour before. I'm just sick of seeing his stupid fucking face. Because I finished the story, I have nothing to really talk about, so I'll just talk about some miscellaneous things that I thought would be important to mention, or things I really like. Something I really like that's very small in the grand scheme of things, and is something you probably never noticed, is the whiteboard lies every time. Each hour, a new sentence is written on the whiteboard in the kitchen. However, each time it's purposely misleading you, and I've seen a bunch of YouTubers not understand that until like halfway through the game. It's the same thing in Emily Wants to Play 2. Apparently a lot of people just forgot the whiteboard was misleading. It's even more painfully obvious, as there's a little winky face in there each message. However, it does change up at certain points, as at 4 AM it reads, "I'll hide and you seek in the dark." which is what you actually have to do. It's exactly the same thing you have to do in Emily Wants to Play 1. The whiteboard really shows how unfair your situation is, intensifying the idea that you're at the mercy of Emily and her dolls. Even more so, in Emily Wants to Play 2, it's not super clear on why Emily and the dolls want to play these twisted games. Most likely it has to do something with the puppet master like I mentioned earlier, but even in Emily Wants to Play 2, his intentions aren't revealed. Hopefully we get a bit more context in Emily Wants to Play 3. Something that Emily Wants to Play gets right is atmosphere. Even with the lights on, the atmosphere in the house is really creepy. Even with the lights on, there's still shadows covering the room as the lights don't fully illuminate the rooms. Another aspect that really helps with the atmosphere is how big the house actually is, which makes you feel lonely as, well, you're the only thing here other than your possessed dolls and a demon girl which is actively trying to kill you. Not to mention that they all have distinct laughs that play when they spawn, adding on to the creep factor. One thing about Emily Wants to Play that I don't see people talk about a lot is the panic it creates. What I mean by this is whenever a doll spawns, they have a specific laugh. However, each hour a new doll is introduced. So when you start an hour and suddenly hear a new doll, you naturally panic, not knowing what to do. And I doubt you would be in the kitchen at the time of the new hour. I doubt even more that you would know the whiteboard is lying to you. Another place where the atmosphere is particularly creepy is in the basement. Like I mentioned earlier, being in the dark puts you at a massive disadvantage, as you're not able to see the dolls as if you would having the lights on. And because Kiki can still move in the dark, and even if you have a flashlight on her, in a dark room she can teleport behind you, because, you know, you can't see her. What doesn't help in this hour as well is Chester turns off the lights after you outrun him, which gives Kiki more room to move around. However, going in the basement plunges you into darkness with only a few little lights illuminating the path in front of you. Even if the basement was fully illuminated, it wouldn't matter as there's a death trap down there. In fact, the first time you probably went into the basement was through this hole, which kills you until a certain hour. The only thing the basement is really used for is learning more about the story, as besides Mr. Taters, you have a disadvantage going down there with the other dolls, specifically Chester. However, Kiki does blend into the darkness as, you know, like I just said, the entire basement was filled with shadows, but perhaps it's time we move on to 4 AM as we only have a minute left before the clock chimes. 4 AM is where it really gets interested, as unlike the last few hours, something is different about 4 AM. Instead of having to defend yourself from dolls, you now have to go searching for Emily, as it's simply a one-on-one versus Emily. Emily shuts all the lights off and forces you to go find her. You have 75 seconds to find her. Running out of time or turning any of the lights on will result in death, and every time you find her, the clock resets to 75. You have to do this until 5 AM. Now that might not sound challenging, but she can spawn anywhere in the house, including the basement. Now, the best way to do this is wait until the clock ticks down to a low number so you can take advantage of the clock resetting, as you don't have to find her a certain amount of times, you just have to wait out the hour, which is surprisingly easy. Now, it's not the easiest hour as the house is fairly big, so you do have to go searching for her, and there's a possibility you might run out of time. This feels a little too easy for the second to last hour of the game. If this hour is easy, I wonder how 5 AM is going to be. Jesus Christ, 5 AM. 5 AM is a gauntlet. You still have to find Emily like in 4 AM, but instead of 75 seconds, you get 90. But you didn't think it would be that easy. Now there's a new stipulation to 5 AM. You now have to defend yourself from the other dolls as well. 5 AM is truly a test of your skills and what you went up into that point. And because the dolls are after you, you can't wait for the time to go down. So once you find Emily, you can't stand there and wait for the time to tick down. And because the lights are permanently off for this hour, all 3 dolls now have an advantage over you. This truly is the final challenge of Emily Wants to Play, and once the chime hits, you are prompted to get out as fast as you can, as if you're too slow, the dolls will kill you. But if you're quick enough, you do get to escape. And that's the end of Emily Wants to Play. Well, until the sequel came out. It definitely shouldn't go undisputed that Emily Wants to Play is not perfect, but it's not a bad game. In fact, it's one of the best indie horror games currently available on Steam, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have its faults. And in my opinion, Emily Wants to Play 2 improves upon Emily Wants to Play's gameplay, mechanics, and visuals. If I had to complain about something in Emily Wants to Play, it would be the length, as it's only around 2 to 3 hours long to fully complete, which is not long at all, and it's not even the shortest game I'm going to be talking about. But it does leave something to be desired, which Emily Wants to Play 2 fills. Conversely, Emily Wants to Play is impressively put together pretty well. The models look good, the plot is decently in depth, and the gameplay is fun. And for a first-time horror game, it's pretty scary. In fact, it has some of the scariest character design I've seen in an indie horror game. And with Emily Wants to Play 2 and Sean's newest game, Pacify, it's definitely an improvement over Emily Wants to Play. But comparing Emily Wants to Play to Emily Wants to Play 2 and Pacify, I would say say it still holds up. Also, apparently Emily Wants to Play and Pacify share the same continuity. In fact, in Emily Wants to Play 3, Sean said he's thinking about making a multiplayer mode. In Emily Wants to Play 3, you play as the corporation from Pacify. This was a fun little nostalgia trip to go back on, as Emily Wants to Play is one of my favorite indie horror games, and it still holds up today, surprisingly. Because games I previously said were some of my favorites, I've torn to shreds, but this was a delightful exception. But let's see if the next game is as good. When I see someone play indie horror games, 9 times out of 10 the experience isn't really going to stick with them. In fact, most people I see play indie horror games sort of fake being scared to an obvious degree. Most indie horror games just don't have the staying power as normal horror games do. When finishing an indie horror game, it leaves something to be desired. It leaves the player empty and wanting more. It's missing something. You know, the category of game it is. However, once in a while there's an exception to that. And this game is one of those exceptions. N4BA is a developer you most likely haven't heard the name of, however you're most likely familiar with their games. Besides the one we're going to be talking about, they're most well known for, the game Wrong Floor. You're most likely familiar with the game as most horror game YouTubers played it. If the developer's credit, it is decent enough. However, the next game featuring the antagonist of Wrong Floor was a step up all around. The game I'm referring to is From the Darkness, being released on March 30th, 2021. YouTubers absolutely ate this thing up. This game is terrifying, not only as a viewer, but an actual person playing it. Now, I personally didn't play it myself, but even if you've never played it, you can still feel the tension. From the Darkness takes inspiration from another well-known horror game, PT, having you walk around back and forth with each time new events occurring. What makes From the Darkness so scary is the atmosphere, just like Emily Wants to Play in the next game I'm going to be talking about. From the Darkness will abuse your paranoia to fuck with you, often playing loud noises or intense music for nothing, just to put you on edge, and it's done exceptionally well. From the Darkness knows it's a horror game, so instead of outright scaring you most of the time, it'll put something in certain areas that make you think someone or something standing there. Like when you first walk into the apartment. Most YouTubers I watch play this, freaked out at the coat hanger, thinking it's a person, while in reality it's just a coat hanger. I've hyped this game up enough, so let's actually get onto why From the Darkness is an actually scary indie horror game. So your first task is to go up to the 64th apartment, which belongs to our grandfather. The game takes place in an abandoned Soviet apartment, as described on the Steam page. On your way there, you'll notice an elevator malfunction, which is probably a reference to Wrong Floor, as it is the same building. I don't really know if this game is an asset flip or all the models are made by N4BA, but either way, it's still really scary looking. Now, because the house is abandoned, obviously the electricity is on, so you have to get the key and turn it back on. This is actually really nice looking. N4BA, for what I've seen, knows how to make a building look old and abandoned, like in Wrong Floor. Looking around the building is legitimately off-putting, especially in the kitchen with old food sitting out and rotten food in the fridge. It's almost like the occupants of the apartment just disappeared one day. Remnants of life once there, now gone, rotted away. Even creepier, on the window you can find a photo of a face. Its details too dark to make anything out. Then there's the uncomfortable small hallways. Later on, that add on to your panic, as during certain scenes, the small hallway is used as an escape route from something that's looming. Even the rooms in the hallways are cramped, like the bathroom just being a sink and a bathtub, and the toilet being its own separate room that you can't see into because the light blows out. And to the left, you can find a dark room that gives this weird visual effect once you enter it, clearly signifying that you're not supposed to be in there. However, during your time looking around through the apartment, the power will go out, causing the player to scramble out in fear. Instead of the power being completely fried, all you have to do is go outside and turn it back on. No big deal, it's not like anything's behind me. Once you turn the power back on, you can almost immediately tell something's off about the atmosphere. Just like in Wrong Floor, From the Darkness doesn't use cheap jump scares as its main horror element, instead using the player's paranoia and atmosphere to create a scary experience that's sure to stick with the player long after finishing the game. What makes From the Darkness so scary is the looming threat of the maniac. Even when you first walk into the hallway, you can see him standing in the doorway. However, not once does he actually attack you. Once again, preying on your paranoia. It's a really good aspect of all the indie horror games we're going to be talking about today, and each of them does it incredibly well, especially From the Darkness, as the main horror element is built on your paranoia. Another way From the Darkness likes scaring players is making you doubt yourself, like how in the living room when you walk by, if you're paying attention, you can notice someone or something standing in the hallway, only illuminating the vague outline of the figure. Just like the coat hanger from when you first walk in, you can't really tell if it's something there, or it's something in your mind. Spoiler, yeah, there's there is something there. If you walk up to it or turn the lights on, it disappears. But if you don't walk up to it and you turn the lights on, it can really make you second guess yourself. Like how when the lights go out for a split second, the paintings sometimes change, making you look at them for an uncomfortable amount of times to make sure they didn't. This game loves to get into the player's mind. During the latest section of the game, you randomly get the prompt that you can press shift to run, or you can hide under the bed, even though there is nothing to run or hide from. It's just things to mess with you. Even tiny little things that you might never notice, like how during one section of the game with the lights flickering on and off, it actually spells out SOS in Morse code. Going back to this door on your left, you'll notice after the power gets turned back on, you're now not alone. You can see someone standing in the doorway. This is your first encounter with the maniac in From the Darkness. However, at first, he doesn't seem like an immediate threat, just casually observing you. Also, at this point, I should probably mention this game is also available to be played in VR, which is a terrible decision showcased in Eddie VR's video.
Hide in the kitchen with Abuelita's cooking. Abuelita's cooking will keep you safe. Abuelita's cooking will keep you safe.
Delightful. Going to your right, you'll notice a key sitting on the desk, which is needed to go into the back closet, which you need a light switch for to go into this room. You got the key, and now you can put it in, and...
Oh, Jesus!
Man, this shit is just as scary as Steve Gur's son. Now, I know I mentioned the main horror element of From the Darkness is the atmosphere and the player's paranoia, but there are a few jump scares. Some of them are cheap, like this one, and some of them are actually pretty well done. And for some reason, this one always gets every YouTuber really bad. The game from here is just a bunch of random scary events that happen. Like when the TV turns on, it shows the maniac's point of view, which shows where the family album book is, right at his feet. Once you grab it, your task is to get out. Obviously you can't because the door shuts on you. Turning around, you get this jump scare. Even after the initial scary parts, this game still builds a lot of tension, like how during the later half of the game, you have to go into the elevator with the maniac, and the entire time he's breathing down your neck, just staring at you, but he never actually does anything. Over the course of the game, you'll definitely notice that the house starts to get more corrupted as I think you're transported to hell or a hellish landscape. Either way, upon finally being able to leave the apartment, it's revealed that you never left hell, and that's how it ends. However, there's still a bunch of things to be discussed about From the Darkness. The first thing I want to talk about is all the parallels to Wrong Floor. Wrong Floor is a really good indie horror game, so it would only make sense that N4BA would reuse elements in certain sections from Wrong Floor, like the ending scare, where he's right behind you as the elevator is coming down. Just like when he's in the elevator with you from the Darkness, he never actually does anything, or the scene where he's supposed to be chasing you, but he's actually not. It makes sense why certain points from Wrong Floor were reused in From the Darkness, and 4BA took the scenes from Wrong Floor and made them better in From the Darkness. Even secluding the parts reused from Wrong Floor, there are still really good scares and moments in From the Darkness, like when the maniac reaches out from the left room just to break one of the light bulbs, rendering that bulb completely useless for the rest of the game. Another aspect that really adds on to From the Darkness is during the intense scenes when you have to run or hide from the maniac in heavy quotations. I don't think it's something N4BA made themselves, but it is still really fitting and adds more attention to an already horrifying event. Now, unlike Emily Wants to Play, where there is an actual danger to be encountered, From the Darkness has no danger. The danger is all in your head. It is a psychological horror game after all. The best way to describe From the Darkness is simply an experience, as you simply cannot die at all. It's only the fear of death that makes you scared, and once it wears off on a second playthrough, or if you see someone play it already, that's when From the Darkness starts to fall apart. From the Darkness is $7, which may not sound like a lot, but it is only an hour long. This specifically is why I had spoiler warnings at the beginning, because From the Darkness is best experienced without any previous knowledge of it. Because unlike Emily Wants to Play, and the next game I'm going to be talking about, From the Darkness is simply just an experience. There is no real gameplay. Sure, there's a few puzzles here and there, but there's simply no sense of danger once you figure out you can't die. If you've seen one of your favorite YouTubers play From the Darkness, it's really not worth the $7, as you already know what's going to happen. Unlike other horror games, if you see a YouTuber play other horror games, most of the time the horror game is going to be an actual game and not just a walking simulator. And that's not to say From the Darkness is a bad game, it's simply just not worth the $7 if you've already seen it. From the Darkness does a lot right, and it's really scary, but it simply doesn't work if you've already seen it. However, it's still an actually scary indie horror game. Indie Indie horror games most of the time don't really have a well put together story, or in some cases a story at all. Emily Wants to Play and From the Darkness had some semblance of a story. However, the next game we're going to be talking about is mostly story driven. Being released on August 2nd, 2022, The Mortuary Assistant is our final stop in the world of actually scary indie horror games. And let me tell you, this one is by far the scariest. Take what I said made the other two games scary and double it, and now you get how scary The Mortuary Assistant is. I know that sounds a little goofy, but stick with me for a minute. The Mortuary Assistant takes things that make Emily Wants to Play and From the Darkness scary and make it even scarier. Unintentional, of course. It takes the creepy character design from Emily Wants to Play and the great atmosphere present in From the Darkness. But what gives The Mortuary Assistant a leg up on Emily Wants to Play and From the Darkness is the story. While Emily Wants to Play did have a pretty decent story, like I mentioned moments prior, The Mortuary Assistant is mainly story driven compared to the spooky scares of From the Darkness. Impressively, The Mortuary Assistant was developed by only one person. That's so odd. All three of these games share a bunch of similarities, most notable that they're all developed by one person respectively. When I make these videos, I don't intentionally choose games that are similar to each other. It's just something that happens. Like in the janky game Trifecta, all of them had conveyor belt platforming sections. It's just a weird coincidence that happens while making these videos. It's never purposely done, as the way I pick games out for these videos is just me looking through what games I have in my Steam library or game collection and vaguely piecing them together. It's not this grand scheme that I spend hours thinking about. Anyway, The Mortuary Assistant takes place in the year 1998. You, the player, are a recent graduate from mortuary school named Rebecca Owens, who begins working for a man and also former teacher named Raymond Delver at Riverfield Mortuary. And because this is an indie horror game, it has to have some tropes, and the tropes of this game is the morgue is unsurprisingly haunted. To understand the story, it is important to mention that Rebecca is a former heroin addict. In fact, this is so important to her character, it's the reason why her father is dead. After being left for dead near a shoreline, her father finds her only for him to slip and fall, knocking him out. However, that's not what kills him. What actually kills him is him falling into the water, which unconscious people in water mix as well as bleach and ammonia. That's right, it fucking kills people. After going in for a review and being sent home early due to unspecified reasons, later on the night she's on a call with her friend just to be interrupted by another phone call, which is Raymond, calling Rebecca to see if she can come in as he's not particularly feeling well. Obviously, this being her dream job, she of course comes in late to take over for Raymond. However, upon arriving to the morgue, she's locked inside by Raymond and told she's been followed by a demon who's trying to take advantage of her past trauma, and in order to get rid of it, she has to spend the night at the morgue, finding out which body's possessed and burn it. And that's the oversimplified premise of The Mortuary Assistant. So the gameplay is pretty simple. All you have to do is embalm each body. After embalming each body, you have to figure out which one is possessed and cremate it. However, the way the Mortuary Assistant goes about doing that is unique. Instead of flat out showing you who's possessed, they give you little clues on who's harvesting a demon side of them. But it's not as easy as just finding out who's possessed. On top of that, you have to find out the name of the demon and bind them to that body. The way you find out the name of the demon is pulling out a piece of paper called a letting strip. If you pull one out and it starts burning, that means a demon sigil is nearby. Collect all 4 sigils, identify the demon correctly, figure out what body it's possessing, bound the demon to the body, and cremate it. But because the Mortuary Assistant was made by someone who's actually competent at game design, it's not as simple as it seems. Each aspect of finding out which demon is possessed is far more depth than meets the eye, as throughout the night the demon will start taunting you, messing with the other bodies, making you faint, and even telling you you're wrong when placing a mark on the body. Throughout the entire night, the demon tries playing mind games with you, trying to deter you from finding out what the demon's name is, even going as far as pretending to be your grandmother. The Mortuary Assistant is far more complex than what's seen on the surface compared to a bunch of other indie horror games. The horror elements used in the Mortuary Assistant are not the primary feature of the game, it just complements the gameplay. The developer of the Mortuary Assistant seems like he just wanted to make a good game with scary elements instead of just making a jump scare simulator. The gameplay of the Mortuary Assistant seems to be the primary focus when developing the game, because let me tell you, the gameplay is really solid. So how is the horror elements? What makes the Mortuary Assistant scary? Just like the other two games, the Mortuary Assistant also preys upon your paranoia, but a lot more than the others did, as it's its main horror element. You will never feel alone playing this game, feeling something is always watching you out of sight. The best way I can describe the Mortuary Assistant's paranoia aspect is in FNAF 2 on the later nights. Every time you put the camera down, you feel like there's gonna be an animatronic waiting in the office for you, except it's done a lot better because you know it's not a shit game like Five Nights at Freddy's. What I mean by that is every corner, every time you turn around, or every time you go in to fetch a body, there's a chance something's gonna be standing there waiting for you, and it really makes you paranoid. There is no immediate threat until later on to the night. The most unique thing about the Mortuary Assistant is every playthrough is different, as there's a whole bunch of different scares and events that some people may see and some people may never see, which unlike the other two games makes replays more unique and worthwhile. So what about the gameplay? The The gameplay, in my opinion, is the best part about the mortuary assistant. The scares are good, the gameplay loop is fun, it all comes together really well. The way the mortuary assistant gameplay works is you have a checklist of things you have to do for each body. All the materials that you need are scattered across the room, which you have to find. Once you have all the things, you can start embalming, which, in order to even start embalming, you have to get a body from the cold storage. Once you have your body set up, you can start embalming. There's 4 important gameplay elements of the mortuary assistant. The first being embalming the bodies, the second one being the lighting strips, the third one being the notepad, and the fourth and final one being figuring out the demon's name and what bodies it's possessing. I've already talked about the embalming, so let's talk about the lighting strips. In order to figure out the demon's name, you must pull out a lighting strip and walk around the building. Once in a while, your lighting strip will burst into flame and a sigil will appear nearby. However, it can appear almost anywhere in the general vicinity. In drawers, underneath surfaces, behind doors, almost anywhere. There are 4 distinct sigils. You have to find all of them. Once you have all of them, you can figure out what the demon's name is. The next gameplay element is the notepad, which is used to tell how far along you are into the possession. Like I mentioned earlier, there is no immediate threat until later on in the night. However, as the night progresses, you start to notice things start to make less and less sense as you're getting possessed, while also scares will become more common. Eventually, writing on your notepad enough times, you'll reveal the class of demon, signified by the symbol you etch into the notepad. Now, the notepad is very important because it essentially tells you how much time you have left. If you're writing just scribbles, you have a fair amount of time left. However, if you scribble the symbol of the demon on your notepad, you don't have much time left, and if you're not fast enough, you will get possessed and get one of the bad endings. The final gameplay element is figuring out the demon's name and what body it is possessing. This is definitely the most important aspect of the gameplay, as it's actually how you beat the game. Now, there's multiple different ways of figuring out what body the demon is possessing, but before we can do that, you have to figure out the demon's name, which is what the sigils are used for. Once obtaining all 4 sigils, you have to go to Raymond's computer, figure out what class of demon it is, and match up the symbols with the sigils you got. Then simply line them up in what order they are on the computer with the mark, put it on the body, and burn it. Simple. However, finding out what body the demon is possessing is not as simple as Raymond says. It can be extremely obvious or extremely subtle. The 2 most defining signs are 1, scratches and claw marks, and 2, prolonged manipulation. If a demon favors a body, it's most likely the demon is possessing that body. But not always, as a demon can manipulate all the bodies. And the claw and scratch marks, once again, can appear on all the bodies. But once you learn about the main gameplay elements, we can start focusing on the scares. The scares in this game are so unique. I've never seen anything like them before. Everything in the embalming room can be used to fuck with you. Tape recorders, phone calls, windows, the tiles on the ceilings, the cabinets, the hallways, doors, the bodies themselves. Everything and anything will be used to scare you. Even if you turn your back for a single second, something can appear. Keep a door closed for too long? Well, something's gonna be standing behind the door waiting for you once you open it again. What's that? Did you see someone walking around the cold storage? No, it's just in your head. This game makes you feel so paranoid and so tense simply due to the atmosphere and the fact that you know something could possibly be there. They can be arbitrary little things, or they can be big loud things like throwing a fucking box across the room. There's so many different events that can happen. It makes the first few playthroughs actually worth playing through. Something I didn't touch upon with the other 2 games because it wasn't as important is immersion. Immersion is very important for horror games, especially games with more realistic graphics, as if the player is more immersed into the world, the scares become more effective. If you make the player forget they're playing a horror game, they forget a horror game is supposed to be scary. I didn't mention this with the other 2 games because it kind of went for a more cartoonish horror compared to the mortuary assistant's realistic approach, which instantly makes it stand out more than most indie horror games. And the whole bunch of random unique scares definitely help with that even more. So let's talk endings. In the mortuary assistant, there's 5, technically 6 endings, some of them being more drastically different than others, but the only important ones for this video are the bad ending and the good ending. The bad ending is pretty simple. The way the player gets the bad ending or wrong body ending is if you burn the wrong body, use the wrong mark, or not add reagent. Well, technically there's actually 2 bad endings. One's the actual bad ending, and the second one is when you get possessed, which only happens if you're not fast enough with embalming the bodies. However, the good ending, or closure ending, is the one that really matters. In order to get this ending, the player must collect the Sorority coins from the apartment before leaving to the mortuary, as well as the set in the cabinet with the identification cards. Then you have to wait to get the mental hospital scare, and one in the rooms where Rebecca is hanging, you have to put the coins in her hand. Then all you have to do is burn the right body with the right mark, and that's how you get the good ending. However, there's actually two ways of getting this ending. The second method has the player collecting the father's necklace from the apartment, which is in the same drawer as the Soriety coins. Then collect the necklace again in the personal belongings drawer, then simply wait for one of the bodies to turn into the father, give him the necklace, and bomb the right body, and that's it. The other three endings are not as notable. Two of the endings are you just beating the game once and then twice, then the last one has you going into the basement. Endings in horror games can be very hit or miss, but I think the motion assistant does the good ending and bad ending pretty well. While it's not that complex of a story, it's still constructed pretty solidly. Something I thought I should bring up in this game is the fact, to my knowledge, this game is actually researched pretty well, and that makes me wonder how much time did this guy spend researching this? I know it's not that hard to do research, especially for a passion project, but it's only one person making this entire game, and I find that very impressive. However, there's a bit of a caveat. The motion assistant is great, but there's something that kind of needs to be said about this game, and that's the price. Especially on release day, it simply was not worth it, as upon first being released, this game was buggy as hell, and on top of that, it only takes 21 hours to fully complete. A lot of people weren't impressed. A lot of people agreed that this game was really scary, but heavily overpriced. And where's my stance in this? I would agree, to a certain extent at least. Once you play the game enough time to get all the endings and all the achievements, yeah, the scares start to wear off. And on the topic of achievements, oh my fucking god, some of these achievements in these games are some of the worst achievements I've ever seen in my life. Well preserved and light 'em up are some of the worst achievements I've seen in a long time. Usually for games I like, I would make an excuse about the price. However, I think this is an exception to that because there's so many more games out there, especially horror games, that offer a lot more for a lot less or even nothing. It just feels a little disheartening to me that I have to mention the price as a negative about this game, because other than that, this game is actually really good, which is not something I say often. But really, $25, if you want to buy the mortuary assistant, you might as well wait until it goes on sale, because it is a good game and the scares in this game are really good as well. It's just the price is a little stinky. All three of these games I've discussed in this video had an unreasonable price, especially from the Darkness and the Mortuary Assistant. Don't get me wrong, there are way worse horror games with way more expensive prices, but the problem is, if the consumer sees a large price point for a short amount of time or a one-time experience, what's going to compel that consumer to actually buy your game? Not a lot. I think all three of these games I've talked about are really good games. However, the price point may make people overlook these great games. Personally, I would pay for all of them, but not everyone would, especially people who aren't particularly into horror. And that's one of the main criticisms of the mortuary assistant, that and it's still kind of buggy. However, at the end of the day, if you overlook the bugs and overlook the price, all three of these games are really solid horror games and are actually scary indie horror games, which is something not every indie horror game can actually say. There's so many different things I left out about all three of these games that simply wouldn't take too much time to discuss, but if this video taught you anything, it should be that indie horror games are very hit or miss, especially ones made by companies or teams. All three of these games I talked about were developed by one single developer respectively, and I think that's impressive that they can actually make a scary indie horror game while a team of people could not. And I find that more impressive than indie horror games being actually scary. The moral of today's story is just because you have a big team and lots of money doesn't mean you can make something that's actually good if you don't put passion into it. Because there'll never be anything more passionate than an indie horror game developer. Because only they are passionate enough to make other shit and still have the balls to upload it, so I may have the displeasure of looking at it. Good night, ladies and gentlemen.